Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. You said the words, you told her you were sorry. You meant it when you said it. And depending on what happened, you might have said it more than once, more carefully than you've said anything in years. And then you waited for it to be over. Not because you're heartless, because in your mind, that's how it's supposed to work. You did something wrong. You owned it. You apologized. And now the two of you move forward. That's the sequence. That's what you were taught an apology does. Except it isn't over, and she brings it up again and again, sometimes weeks later, sometimes in the middle of a conversation about something completely unrelated. Or she doesn't bring it up at all, but you can feel it sitting in the room anyway. In the way she goes quiet, in the way she flinches at something small. And somewhere inside of you, a thought starts to form that you don't say out loud because it feels ugly the moment you think it. I already apologized. What more does she want from me? Welcome to episode 65. You said sorry. Why isn't it over? Most men were taught that an apology is a transaction. You did something. You acknowledged it. You say the words. The account is settled. It's how most of us were raised to handle wrongdoing, going all the way back to childhood. You broke something. You said sorry. Your mother told you it was okay, and the conversation ended, clean, contained, over in a minute. So when you're standing in the kitchen after a difficult conversation with your wife, having just said the most difficult sentence you've said in years, some part of you is waiting for the same resolution. You said it, you meant it. Now it should be behind you. When it isn't behind you, when she brings it up again 3 weeks later and gets distant during something that has nothing to do with what happened, it doesn't feel like grief to you. It feels like punishment. It feels like she's holding something over you that you've already paid for. And that feeling, more than almost anything else, is what turns an apologetic man into a defensive one. The wife doesn't usually say this in words that land, and even if she did, shame usually gets in the way of hearing it clearly. An apology answers one question. What did you do? It does not answer the question she's actually asking, which is closer to, do you understand what this did to me? And how do I know it won't happen again? Those are not the same question. You can answer the first one completely and still leave the second one untouched. And if you don't know that the second question exists, every time she brings it up again, it looks to you like she's stuck or punishing you or unable to move on. From where you're standing, you did the difficult thing. You confessed, you apologized, you're trying. So the fact that it isn't resolved starts to feel unfair. This is where a lot of men quietly start keeping score. I said sorry. I've been different. I haven't done it again. So what else am I supposed to do? And once you're keeping score, you've already stopped listening for what she's actually telling you because you're too busy defending a case she never asked you to argue. Here's something I say to almost every man I work with in this situation because it tends to be the sentence that changes how they see the entire dynamic. You are living inside a movie she has never been shown. In your head, you know everything. You know how much you've thought about what happened. You know the nights you couldn't sleep. You know the moment you decided something had to change and meant it. You know the small ways you've been trying, the effort you've put into being different, the internal conversations you've had with yourself that no one else has witnessed. To you, that movie is proof. It's evidence of remorse, of growth, of a man taking this seriously. She has never seen a single frame of it. All she has access to is what's visible from the outside. Whether you get short with her when she brings it up again, whether you change the subject, whether your face does that thing it does when you feel accused. That particular tightness that she's learned to read as, here we go again. She isn't inside your head watching the movie of your remorse. She's standing across the kitchen watching your body language in real time. And if what she sees looks like defensiveness or impatience, that's the only data she has. One man I worked with put it this way. He said he felt like he had to prove and earn it, but kept failing. What was actually happening was that he had done a tremendous amount of internal work and assumed the internal work would eventually become visible on its own, the way effort at a job eventually shows up and you get a promotion. But a marriage doesn't work by inference. She can't extrapolate from your silence that you've changed. She needs the movie narrated to her, not because she's being demanding or unreasonable, but because narration is the only way internal experience becomes something two people can actually share. This is uncomfortable to hear because it means the work isn't finished when you've changed internally. It's finished when she can see it. And most men have never been taught how to do that kind of narrating because nobody sat them down and said, when you feel yourself doing better, say so, out loud, specifically, without waiting to be asked. If you've noticed that the old hurt seems to be resurfacing at strange moments, not during a conversation about what happened, but during an argument about the dishes or a quiet night that suddenly turns cold, you're not imagining a pattern that isn't there. You're witnessing exactly how this kind of pain tends to move. Hurt like this doesn't stay in its lane. It doesn't wait for an appropriate moment to raise its hand. It lives in her body as something closer to vigilance than a memory. And vigilance gets triggered by anything that resembles the original threat, even faintly. A tone of voice, a late text, a moment where you seem distracted or evasive about something small and unrelated. None of that means she's reliving what happened on purpose or trying to punish you with it. It means her nervous system is still scanning for the thing that hurt her the first time, because it hasn't yet received enough evidence that the threat is gone. This is why it can look like withdrawal one week and something closer to an outburst the next. Both are the same signal wearing different clothes. Withdrawal is her pulling back because staying open feels unsafe in that moment. Lashing out is the same fear, except it came out as heat instead of retreat. Neither one means she's failing to get over it. Both mean the fear hasn't been replaced yet with enough evidence of safety to settle down. Here's where it gets difficult for you specifically. When that resurfacing happens and you respond with defensiveness, even mild defensiveness, even just a sigh or, we already talked about this, you unintentionally confirm the exact fear she is carrying. Her nervous system isn't asking whether you're a good man. It's asking a much narrower, more practical question. If I bring this up again, will he stay with me in it? Or will he protect himself instead? Every time the answer is protect himself, the fear gets a small piece of new evidence that it was right to still be afraid. Every time the answer is stay, the fear loses a small piece of its case. This is not about being endlessly patient with something that never improves. It's about understanding that the timeline for this kind of healing is not set by how sorry you feel or how long ago it happened. It's set by how much consistent evidence she's gathered that you can hear this again without flinching away from her. Let's stay with defensive for a moment because it's the single biggest thing standing between where you are now and where you want to be. When she brings it up again and you feel that tightening in your chest, the urge to explain yourself and to remind her how much you've changed, to point out that you've already apologized, that urge feels like self-protection. It feels reasonable. You're not trying to hurt her, you're just trying to defend the fact that you're a better man now than you were then. But from where she's sitting, defensiveness doesn't read as self-protection. It reads as unwillingness to sit with what she is carrying. An unwillingness to sit with it looks to her nervous system exactly like the thing she's afraid of, which is that you'll minimize her pain the moment it becomes inconvenient for you. This is the part that most men genuinely don't see, because in the moment, defensiveness doesn't feel like minimizing. It feels like you're standing up for yourself against an accusation that you have already answered. But she isn't accusing you of the original thing anymore. She's asking a live, present tense question. Can I still feel this out loud in front of you without you making it about your discomfort instead of mine? And every time the answer is no, she learns that the safest thing to do is to stop asking, which doesn't mean the fear goes away. It means it goes underground, where it will surface again later. Usually about something that looks completely unrelated. I want to be honest about something here because I don't want this episode to be one more thing that makes you feel like you can never get it right. Some of the defensiveness you feel is not because you're avoiding accountability. It's because nobody ever taught you how to sit in a feeling that isn't resolving on your timeline. You were taught to fix things, to close the loop, to move forward. Sitting still inside someone else's unresolved pain without trying to talk her out of it or speed her through it is a skill almost no man is raised with. It has to be learned deliberately. It is not instinct for most people, and it certainly wasn't modeled for most of the men listening to this. I want to say something directly to the men listening to this whose situation is heavier than a single difficult moment. If what happened was an affair or a pattern of porn use that she discovered and experienced as betrayal, everything in this episode is still true, but it's true at a different depth. With infidelity, the movie Only You Can See becomes even more dangerous because your internal experience of remorse can start to feel to you like it should count as proof against the worst conclusion she's drawn, which is usually some version of, he doesn't love me the way I thought he did, and he's capable of choosing something else over our marriage. You know that isn't true about you, or you believe it isn't, but she doesn't have access to your certainty. She only has access to the fact that it happened once, which means her nervous system now treats it as something that could happen again, regardless of how sure you are that it won't. This is where that finish line thinking becomes most dangerous, because the stakes make men want resolution even more urgently. You want the marriage to feel normal again. You want to stop feeling like a suspect in your own home. That wanting is understandable, but wanting it to be resolved and it actually being resolved are different timelines, and trying to force the second one to match the first is usually what causes the most damage in the months after disclosure. If this is your situation, the work isn't just narrating your internal movie. It's rebuilding a kind of transparency that she gets to define, not you, for as long as she needs it, without treating her need for that transparency as evidence that she doesn't trust your growth. She doesn't trust it yet because trust isn't rebuilt by a decision. It's rebuilt by time and consistency, the same way it was broken by a choice in a moment. I'll be doing a future episode that goes deeper into rebuilding after infidelity specifically, because it deserves its own full conversation. But for now, the core of what I want you to hear is this. Whether the mistake was an affair or a pattern you're not proud of, or a decade of emotional absence you finally woke up to, the dynamic underneath is the same. She is not asking you to relive your shame forever. She is asking whether you can stay present with her fear again and again until her body finally believes what your words have already told her. So if apologizing once isn't the finish line, what is? It starts with narrating the movie instead of assuming she can see it. This means telling her specifically and without being asked what's actually shifted in you. Not in vague terms like, I'm working on it, but in concrete ones. What you've noticed about yourself, what you did differently in a moment that used to go the other way, what you are still finding difficult. This kind of narration does something an apology alone cannot do. It gives her something to actually witness instead of something she has to take on faith. It also means learning to sit with her when fear resurfaces without treating her bringing it up again as a setback or an attack. This is the most difficult part for most men because it requires staying regulated while someone you love is telling you again that something you did hurt her deeply. Every instinct will tell you to explain, to remind her how far you've come, to move the conversation towards resolution. The skill is resisting that instinct and instead saying something closer to, tell me what you're feeling right now. I want to understand it. I'm not going anywhere. That sentence does more relational work than almost anything else you can say because it directly answers the question her nervous system keeps asking. It says, you can bring this to me again and I will stay. None of this happens once. It happens perhaps dozens of times, sometimes over months, sometimes over years. And it will not always feel fair, especially on the nights when you've genuinely changed and she is still afraid. But the fear isn't a referendum on whether your change is real. It's evidence of how deep the original wound went. The way through is not defending your growth. It's letting her witness it again and again until her body starts to believe what your words have already told her. I was talking to one of my clients recently about exactly this. A man who was doing real work on himself but couldn't understand why his wife still seemed braced around him months later. He told me he was never taught how to be emotionally aware growing up, that in fact, he was taught to pretend negative situations and emotions weren't really there. That is not an excuse, but it is the truth for a lot of men, and understanding it is often the first step toward doing something different than what you are shown. If you've been listening to this and feeling that particular mix of recognition and discomfort, sit with a few questions, not to judge yourself, but as a mechanism to see clearly. Have you been treating your apology as the end of the conversation instead of the beginning of a longer one? When she brings up what happened again, does your first instinct protect her feelings or protect your own discomfort? Have you actually told her what's changed in you in specific terms? Or have you assumed she can see it because you can feel it? Seeing this clearly doesn't mean you did something unforgivable. It means you've been operating with an incomplete map of what repair actually requires. That map can be redrawn. If you want help understanding exactly what that looks like in your specific situation, not in theory, but the actual conversations you're having at home, I'm hosting a free webinar on August 4th, where I'll walk through exactly this. What she actually needs to see from you and how to give it to her without losing yourself in the process. It's at 2 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Central, and 5 p.m. Eastern. You can save your seat at the link in the show notes. I would love to have you there. You don't need her to forgive you on your timeline. You need to become someone she can finally stop bracing against. That is a different project, and it is one you are capable of. See you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.